Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys checking today's video out and spending some time with me. And guys, today I want to respond to a request from a video. I had Chris Johnson. He was the YouTuber that I talked about a couple weeks ago that I just love his channel. Old school angler. Guys, I just love everything he does on his channel. He wanted to know about how I won the Beaver Lake Central Pro-Am tournament that he actually fished several years ago. So what I want to do today, guys, I want to explain to you guys how I won this particular tournament. And I think one of the reasons I want to do this is it'll give you a good understanding about what it takes to win a tournament and how you need to break down the water. And I think it's going to be a pretty good learning experience when you hear about it, how all this happens. So we're going to get into that in today's video. Also, guys, just two quick housekeeping tips. You guys have to endure every video. Just wanted to remind everybody, got spring coming up. I'd like to invite you to check out my Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns. I'll link them in the description there, guys. Great resources to learn more about your favorite lakes and get some good spots on them. And also, we got 30% off this month on my Solar Bat series, Signature Series sunglasses. I'll put the link in the description of the video. You can get them through Solar Bat or Tackle Warehouse. I'll put both links in the description, so really appreciate that. Okay, guys, this was several years ago. This was a kind of May, first week of May tournament down at Beaver Lake in Arkansas. And the conditions for this particular tournament, there were some fish that were still bedding, but a lot of the fish had got done spawning, but there were still some fish up on the beds. Water was probably about, I'm going to guess, 4 feet over normal. So you had a lot of flooded bushes in the water, but they weren't in real deep water. It's like, it was good flipping situation, but it was marginal. It's like it was almost to the point where it wasn't that good as far as the water being a little bit too low. And on top of that, the water is pretty clear. So anyway, in this particular tournament, I went down there planning on flipping. I mean, the water was up a little bit more in practice and it slowly started dropping down, but anytime the water's up in the bushes and I get a chance to catch fish flipping bushes, that's what I'm going to be doing. So that was my game plan. So I'm pretty familiar with Beaver Lake, so I decided I wanted to try to concentrate on the flat areas, the flattest areas that I could find, because those are the areas that are going to hold the most bushes. And on Beaver Lake, you've got a mix of some willow trees and different type of bushes. And the buck brushes, what's called the buck bushes at Beaver Lake, some of them are fairly large, some of them are small. There's a lot of different, sizes of them. And in that particular tournament, probably about 75% of them still didn't have any green leaves on them. It was still early in the year and they hadn't got their leaves. And there was probably, 25% of the bushes on the lake that had green leaves on them that were starting to green up a little bit. So anyway, I got on a pattern and, only had one day of practice to go down there. So I started, flipping and pitching pretty close to the takeoff there at Prairie Creek at the launch ramp. And right off the bat, I bent my hooks over, and the bait that I was fishing a 1/2 ounce green pumpkin jig, and I had a green pumpkin craw on it, just an old Jean LaRue salt craw at the time. That's one of my favorite setups, guys, is that old school craw, like whether it be like just some type of like the Zoom little critter craw, or used to be the Guido bug, but just some type of crawdad, trailer on a green pumpkin jig when I'm flipping bushes. It just seems like in the that time of year works pretty good. Flipping it on 30-pound test mono back at the time. I used to flip with 30-pound mono all the time before I started using Seaguard and Vizex. Now I go to 25-pound test and Vizex for most of my fishing. So anyway, in that particular tournament, I had I probably shook off 20 fish in practice, and I could see the water was clear where I was fishing. It's like a lot of the places you could see the bottom, the water was so clear in the bushes. So the thing that I figured out in the tournament is I had to make really, really long pitches. And I think that's one of the reasons that helped me win the tournament is most people got too close to the cover. So I would make a super long pitch. And a lot of times, guys, the pitch that I would make would be 50, 60 feet away. And with that heavy jig, I could put it in where I wanted to. So I got the pattern dialed down to where the fish were in the bushes that had the green leaves on it, and you had to have a bush that had a little bit more complexity to it. So in other words, you'd be out on this big giant flat, there'd be hundreds of bushes out there, and there was only like a handful of bushes that the fish were using. So I got so dialed into the pattern that I could pull up to a flat and I could scour the flat, and I could just pretty much call my shots by looking for those bushes that they were a little bit complex and they had a little bit more shade in them, and they had the green leaves. The water is only about probably 3.5 feet deep. I could see the bottom in the bushes, and I would get way back and I'd make a super long pitch into those bushes, and then I'd feed the line out and just sit there and shake it, and that's how they bit it. So the first day of the tournament, everything went pretty well, and I think I had 12 pounds or something like that, and I was in the top 10 in the tournament, maybe the top 5, I can't remember, maybe been like in the top, I think I was in the top 5, maybe 4th or 5th or something like that. Sunny day, it was just perfect flipping conditions, pretty confident, had a lot of bites, and everything went pretty good. So the second day of the tournament, I knew in order to win the tournament that I probably had to get bit by a good one. I didn't have any good fish that first day, they were all about the same size. So I knew in order to make up, I think I was maybe a pound or so out of the lead, I knew I had to get a good bite. So guys, the first place I went to that morning, it started out, it was low light conditions, and it was raining, light rain, heavy overcast. The first place I went to this little pocket where I'd caught one the day before, and there was a willow tree out in the middle of this pocket. Pitched that jig in there and caught a 5-pounder right off the bat. So it's like, I knew that I had my kicker. If I could just get a limit of fish, I didn't think anyone could beat me. So I wound up catching, I think, 2 more fish over the course of the next 3 or 4 hours, and it got super, super tough. And for whatever reason, it's just like they were not biting hardly at all. So I had the 5-pounder, and I had 2 other pretty solid keepers, like, I don't know, they were 2.5 pounders, which was back then was a pretty decent fish for Beaver Lake. But I couldn't. I ran through all my best flipping stuff, and I just couldn't get a bite. And then it started raining a little bit heavier, and I said, okay, I've got to adjust to these conditions. And one of my favorite ways to catch them in May is to fish a floating worm. So I ran down the lake to a creek down there that I had never practiced in that particular time, but I had been there in the past, and I knew that a lot of fish spawned in there. I'd seen tons of spawning fish before. So I run down there, I've got like 2 hours left to fish. I put on a floating worm, and I'm cruising down through the bank there, and I could see empty beds everywhere. So it started to rain, started throwing that floating worm in and around those bedding areas, and right off the bat I caught a nice one, like a 2 3/4 pounder, gave me 4, and I just knew if I can get one more bite, I have a really good chance of winning the tournament. So I worked, down the same cove that I just caught that one, and I got in the very back of the cove, casted that floating worm down the bank, worked it just under the surface. All of a sudden, this nice one comes up, grabs it, set the hook on it, and that gives me 5. So ran back into the weigh-in. Fishing was a little bit tough. Everybody had a hard time. I wound up, I can't remember what I had that last day. It was like 14 or 15 pounds. It was a pretty good bag. Wound up winning the tournament. Back then, they paid pretty good. It paid, I don't know, 10 or 15,000 to win back in that tournament. So just pretty satisfying win, because I'd won one at Truman Lake the year before that on the same circuit, and then won the Titleist tournament the very next year at Table Rock. So it was a pretty good streak there. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there for Chris Johnson. He wanted to know how I won that tournament. And just old school flipping, man, 30-pound monofilament line, half-ounce jig, crawl on it, just the way I love to fish. So anyway, guys, hope it helps you guys catch a few. We'll talk later.